This is a follow-up to my video on 3 mistakes owners make in their leases that drive down the value of their property. It's the right to renewal piece. I see it happen so often and it gets me so frustrated, which is why I'm making a separate video about it. So if you're not aware, a right to renewal gives the tenant the right to renew their lease at a predetermined rental rate and a predetermined length when their lease is up. It completely eliminates the opportunity for an owner to come in and renegotiate the lease to market rate, or come in and talk to tenants. Hey, what's going on with your business? Maybe we can give you some improvements. Maybe we can give you some TI, some build out. It completely gets rid of that, and it lets the tenant renew their lease typically at a rate well below market rate value. And on top of that, if all the tenants in a building have a predetermined right to renew, if an owner wants to go ahead and then make the building nicer, typically they can't get the rents up once the building is renovated because the tenants already have a pre-negotiated rental rate. So whatever you do, it's not going to help the value of your rental property. So I hate these clauses. But the worst thing about it is how nonchalant so many owners are about just throwing in these on their leases. It's always funny to me. Sometimes I'll look at a rent roll on a shopping center and you see tenants who are renting out commercial space for the first time. You know, it's a mom and pop shop, you know, renting out a 1,000 square foot suite. A lot of times you look at the lease, they weren't even represented by a broker. So really, they had no way to know what a right to renew is. But owners will just give them out because they don't want to deal with renegotiating the rate when the term is up. So they'd rather have a pre-negotiated one. And sometimes owners are under the impression that when you have a right to renew built into a lease, it somehow increases the value of the lease or the property because the right to renew is supposed to symbolize the tenant's interest in staying in the property. No, it doesn't. Who are you fooling? Having a pre-negotiated right to renew does not mean the tenant is going to stay in that property long term. Don't kid yourself. No buyer's going to believe it, so don't pretend like it's a win to have those on there. Really, all you're doing is just handing over control of the property over to the tenants. So the biggest thing with them is you don't want to include them in your leases because more than anything, you're handing over control, you're making the property less valuable to potential buyers, and you're reducing your options available to you with the property. How do you deal with this? Really, what you want to structure things is whenever you're negotiating a lease, first off, don't bring it up. A lot of the tenants won't even think about this kind of stuff. Sometimes when they do, maybe this is their 3rd or 4th lease, you can just say, I don't do rights to renew. Is there a way we can work around this? And tenants are usually very willing to work with you on this. So I recently dealt with a situation where the tenant wanted to do a 3-year lease on a property, but then also have rights to renew up to a case where their rental rate would have been negotiated 10 years out. Now, obviously, I didn't like that. I was representing the landlord. I explained to him, hey, this is going to significantly reduce the value of your property if you go ahead and go with these options. So what we ended up doing is we went to the tenant and said, hey, if I could convince the landlord to give you a 5-year lease over the 3-year, but the 5-year would not have any options to renew, would that work for you? Tenant thought about it and said, absolutely, it worked. Because the tenant, it's a win-win. The tenant now knows their rental rate for the next 5 years out, and the landlord didn't completely hand over control of the property and the rental rate 5 years from now. 5 years from now, the tenant and the landlord are going to sit down, talk about their needs, talk about the plans for the business, and renegotiate the lease in a way that works for them both, rather than the landlord completely handing over control of their property and the rental rate and whatever the market does to the tenant. Basically what I'm saying is, don't do rights to renew. They just hand over the control of your rental property to your tenants, and thereby reducing the value that you have of the property and reducing your options. Whenever you're having a situation where a tenant is insistent upon a right to renew, find a way to make that situation a win-win, and you guys are going to both walk out of that negotiation better off. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.